Hello, my beautiful friends. Thank you so much for stopping by. I'm super excited about this video because I'm going to be sharing with you the books that made it to my top 10 this year. I'm going to try to do in ascending order from my least favorite to my most favorite. Now, I think some of these probably are interchangeable and they're still my favorites. So every book on here I loved and had a great time reading. I also just want to let you know, this is based on feelings. Like if I get a 5-star feeling from a book, it's on here. You know, these are my top favorite, made me feel the 5-star feeling books. Okay? The first one I have is The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barn. This one is following our main character, Cassie. It's been a minute since I've read it, obviously. And she is a teenager. She has lost her mom recently by murder. She's just trying to make it. She's living with her dad's family, working as a waitress in this little diner. And one day, this guy comes in who's about her age and is like trying to interact with her. She's like having none of it, but then he leaves her a card and it says like FBI on it or something. And so she's like, what? But Cassie has always been super good at profiling people, basically like cold reading people. And on this card, I can't remember exactly what it says, but it's basically like, contact us if you want to use your skill in a more sophisticated way. She's never really thought about this skill that she has until that moment when she's like, well, maybe this is my way out of here. And also, since it's with the FBI, she can figure out what actually happened to her mom because her mom was murdered, but the case has gone unsolved. And so Cassie's like, I'm gonna figure out what's going on with my mom or like what happened with her. So it turns out that the FBI has an elite group of teenagers who is basically like Criminal Minds, but young adult version of that. So there's Cassie, who can like cold read people, profile people. There's another profiler. There's one who can read emotions, like can tell exactly what you're feeling in any moment. There's one who's like the brains of the group. And I just really had a fun time with this. I was shocked by the reveal of what's going on. I kind of have a feeling that the overall mystery of what happened to her mom is going to be throughout the whole book series. There's 4 books in the series, and I've only read this one, but I think that each book in the series has like a side, not a side mystery, it's the main plot of the book, but there's an overarching storyline of what happened to Cassie's mom. So I have heard really good things from people who I align a lot with in their book taste about this whole series, and I'm really excited to continue. But yeah, I just had a blast reading this book and I flew through it. So I'm excited to continue on, but that's my number 10. In the number 9 spot, I have Frozen Detective by Amanda Flower. This is a cozy mystery. Amanda Flower is it's between her and Bree Baker as my top favorite cozy mystery authors, but I'm pretty sure it's Amanda Flower because I just love the way she tells a story, her writing style. I love the way she describes the settings and such, and that's one of the big reasons why I love this book, because it's set at a ski chalet. It's this like very swanky, fancy ski chalet or ski lodge. We're following our main character, Darby Piper. Darby Piper, who is a part of this private investigator company. She's one of the 2 people involved. I really liked that aspect, by the way, because a lot of times in cozy mysteries, you get kind of the amateur sleuth situation happening a lot, and the main character is trying to figure out what happened to whoever died. But I loved that Darby Piper was a lot more professional, or like knew kind of what she was doing a little more, and I really enjoyed that aspect. So what happens in this one is a woman comes to Porter and Piper, right? Piper and Porter, private investigation company, and she hires her partner and her to go to this ski lodge during a party for her husband, because her husband, who is like a wealthy doctor, has been receiving threats. But the woman is kind of sketchy herself because she's not giving all the information that they need to do the investigation. Like, where are the notes? Where are the threats? Can we look at them? And she's like, oh yeah, like I'll show them to you later, you know, not now or whatever. And so they're kind of already like on edge about this. But since they are having a party, this woman is like really convinced that whoever's making these threats is going to be at this party. So they go to the ski lodge as guests, like undercover, and try to figure out, or start to figure out, who is making these threats to this doctor. I think that what made this book the 5-star feeling that it was the setting, because just hit at the right moment. I was reading this right when I was like, oh, I'm ready for winter books. And of course we have snow on a mountain at a ski lodge. I loved all the side characters. I thought it was really a good mystery, and I just had a lot of fun. I loved our main character, Darby. I'm really hoping that she writes more in this mystery series because I just loved it. This is the second book in this series. I accidentally read this one first. I put that in a reading blog. So if you want to see me read this, I will try to remember to link that reading blog, but it's probably not too far back on my channel if I forget. I'm pretty sure the first one is called Dead End Detective in this series, but like I said, I'm really hoping that Amanda Flower decides to write more in this series because I loved it. For number 8, I have If I Run by Terry Blackstock. This book was so good. This is actually a Christian romantic suspense is what it's marketed under. However, this is the first book in a 3-book series, and the romance doesn't even really come till the very end of book 2. So I haven't finished the series yet. I really need to. It'll take me like a day probably to read it, because that's something I loved about Terry Blackstock's writing, is that you can really fly through these books. This one is following our main character, Casey. Basically, when this book opens, it's kind of an intense opener. It's like, okay, this is the pace we're going at right now. Like, this book starts off with a bang. But Casey is at a crime scene. It opens up to her with like blood on her hands, blood all over her body. And that sounds really intense for like a Christian suspense novel, but I'm telling you, it's so good. She is at the crime scene of her friend's murder. She did not commit this crime, but she knows that she's gonna get pinned for it if she stays. So she runs and she just basically leaves town. She doesn't get anything, like she just leaves. For some reason, she knows that the police would pin it on her. She thinks that they're corrupt for reasons that you find throughout the book, so I won't tell you here, but it's really good. I think what I loved the most about this was the fast-pacedness of this story, but also the faith. Okay, I loved the faith aspect of this one. It felt so genuine and not cheesy. It was very real and honest. Casey is, I don't think she's a Christian at first, or like she just has a lot of questions about God, and she comes across a woman named Miss Lucy on a bus and has an interaction with her. It's just so good. Like, I think that's why I loved this so much. Just the honest, real questions that a lot of people have. I really appreciated Terry Blackstock writing a character like Casey. I just loved how she could write such a good mystery suspense, but also incorporate such strong faith themes without it being too much in your face, you know? So I loved it. I loved it. The next one is another cozy mystery. I love me a good cozy mystery, y'all. Okay? But it is Pros and Cons by Amanda Flower. I'm telling you, Amanda Flower is my girl. This series is so cute and so much fun. It's following this kind of magical bookstore. If you find yourself in this bookstore, you tend to find the right book. Our main character, Violet, and her grandmother own and run this bookstore. They see the books like getting to the person, like flying off a shelf and getting into the hands of the person, or like falling on the floor in front of them or whatever. But people aren't really aware that it's a magical bookstore. It's just Violet and her grandma who know that. But I just had the best time with this one. It is set around Halloween and it's very Edgar Allan Poe feels, because Violet has a book club and they theme their book club meetings around a character, a literary character, and this one is around Edgar Allan Poe. They have like a poetry reading. It's in October. They're having a wine festival currently at Cascade Springs near Niagara Falls. It's not a book club, it's a writer's club. I forgot. She's in this club full of writers and they kind of share their work, read each other's work, give feedback, etc. But during this festival, one of the writers in her group is found murdered. And so she has to figure out what happened to them. I think too, this was my first cozy mystery since a couple of years ago. I read this towards the beginning of 2024 and I just loved it. It just hit the spot. It was so cozy, atmospheric. Obviously, it's Amanda Flower. You cannot go wrong. I absolutely had the best time reading this one. The next one I have is The Summer of Yes by Courtney Walsh. This one is so fun and heartfelt. It made me cry. It made me feel all the feels. I loved it so much. On the back it says, sometimes you're so busy writing other people's stories that you lose the plot of your own. If you can't tell, you know what I mean? It's following our main character, Kelsey. She is kind of a workaholic until one day when she goes to a Starbucks, a car almost runs her over and she kind of has an existential crisis where she's like, what am I doing with my life? I feel like I don't live, I just work and that's it. And I don't even know if I like what I'm doing. And so she kind of is like, what am I gonna do? I want to do more with my life. I want to live my life doing the things that I'm passionate about and I love. And she just so happens to cross paths in the hospital with Georgina, who is a makeup mogul. She is an older woman who has really made her name big, I guess, in the makeup space. And she is kind of just this very strong woman who is actually Kelsey really admires because she has made a name for herself. She has put her career above all things. Georgina is pretty grumpy. There is definitely reminiscence of The Devil Wears Prada, that movie with Meryl Streep in it. So Kelsey ends up in Georgina's hospital room. They're like two different patients in one room, even though Georgina is like, get her out. I want my own hospital room. But Kelsey's like, I have an idea. You are going to come with me and we're going to have the summer of yes, saying yes to things that we would normally say no to, fully living our lives. And so I just loved it. There is 2 side romances. I would say this is definitely more literary than romance heavy. It's really more concerned with the lives of Kelsey and Georgina, which I personally really enjoyed. But the romance in this was super good. This was my first Courtney Walsh and I absolutely love her writing style. This is completely clean. There's no language in it. You could tell that Courtney Walsh put a lot of her own personal experience in this one. I absolutely adored it. So it made me think, it made me reevaluate a lot in my own life, which I really love it when a book can do that. Make you think about your own life and reevaluating, what am I doing or what do I want in my life? You know, I loved it. So if that wasn't obvious, it is on this list after all. I probably should stop saying I loved it about every book, but I did love it. Number 4 on this list is Everyone on This Train is a Suspect by Benjamin Stevenson. This was so fun, you guys, like so fun. It was very reminiscent to me of Agatha Christie, obviously, like the Murder on the Orient Express, just that trope of someone got murdered on this train and, you know, it's a confined space where only a certain amount of people are on the train. It's a moving train across Australia. It was really fun too because this setting, not only on a train, but also surrounded by authors because on this train, it's like this very expensive retreat train across Australia, and they had a writer's event or an author's event, and the main speaker was this older, very, very famous mystery writer. One of the authors ends up murdered, or you think maybe murdered. And so the back says, everyone on this train is a suspect. The debut writer, me, the forensic science writer, the blockbuster writer, the legal thriller writer, the literary writer, the psychological suspense writer. I had the best time with this book because it's very meta. So Benjamin Stevenson does this really fun thing where he talks to you as the reader about what's going on. So he'll break is it the third wall? Is that what it is? The fourth wall? Anyways, he talks to you. It felt like you were reading a nonfiction book about an event that actually took place, but it's completely fiction, obviously. It was super good. It was super, super good. I absolutely love his writing style. I think it was such a fun time. This did take me by such surprise just because I really didn't have a desire, I guess. I don't really even know why, to read his first book. But then my friend told me that she really thought that I would love this book and that you didn't have to necessarily read them in order. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll pick up this one. And I'm so glad I did because it was such a blast. I loved it. I loved every single second of it. I have his first book now. I haven't finished it. I have started it, but I've gotten distracted. But there's just something really special and unique about the way he tells his stories that I'm so excited to read his backlist. I really recommend if you like Agatha Christie. I think this is compared to Anthony Horowitz and Richard Osman. It says, Murder on the Orient Express meets Clue. And I'd say that's exactly what this is. It was super, super good. The next 3, I don't know how to place them because they feel similar to me. They're very different stories, but in regards to like how I feel about them, they're all on the same level, you know? So I'm gonna say one in order, but honestly, these are all in my like top 2 position. Okay. I think first I'm going to talk about The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young. This book was so good, so atmospheric, so whimsical and magical and very unexpected. I did not expect to love this book as much as I did, but I'm so glad that I read it. I had a good feeling about it, but I didn't know anything about it. And I think that's how you have to read this book. So all I'm going to say about it is that it's following our main character, June. She comes from a line of women who kind of tend to start going crazy. Okay? They all start seeing things like visions, and these visions feel very, very, very real to these women. And eventually they end up seeing a red door. They have to make a decision if they're going to go through the door or if they're going to stay where they are. The reason why I don't think you should know anything else besides that going into this is because you do find out a lot with the main character if you just let yourself do that. Don't read the synopsis, just go into it blind. That's how I'm recommending reading this book. I cannot express how much I love this book. It was such a really cool experience because I just picked it up. I was like, I'm in the mood for this. I don't know what it's about. And then I instantly loved it. I felt the love for it the whole time I was reading this book. I would say if you like mystery, if you like magical realism, I guess you would say. Is that the term? I think. magical realism because there are some whimsical aspects to the story. If you like romance, there is a bit of a romance in this book, which I wasn't expecting, but I really, 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 really loved the romance, which is saying a lot because I'm not a romance person. There's also elements of motherhood. I love reading about women in families. There's something super intriguing about that to me. And so that's definitely in this story. I just loved it. I think I'm probably going to end up rereading this at some point because your girl loved it. I cannot wait until Adrienne Young comes out. I think it's January 7th, her new book about twins, which I think is super interesting. I'm pretty sure Adrienne Young is a twin, so that makes it even better. But anyways, I loved it. Her prose, you guys, so lush, so beautiful. Just the descriptions of setting and the way she could write about everything she wrote about in here was like a very magical experience for me. Not magical, but just a really special experience for me. I connected so deeply with her writing. This story is just taking up residence in my heart because I loved it that much, you know? Okay, I guess I'll put this one next, but I'm telling you, these three are like the same level for me, but The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. It's interesting because I kind of had similar, these kind of look the same or like similar, but I had the same feeling while like looking at this and reading about it that I did with this one. I just kind of felt like I would like it. Like I just was drawn to it and I was like, I feel like I'm going to actually really like this book. And turns out I did, obviously. But this one is a very interesting story. First of all, Liz Moore's writing style, I loved. I just loved it so much. There is a little bit of a melancholic feel to her writing. This is set at like a summer camp, but it felt like summer camp if it was raining all the time. Does that make sense? Maybe not. Who knows? If you've read it, you probably know what I mean. But it's not like summer camp happy feels. It's very much a somber story about this family who owns the summer camp and has some dark secrets. I'll just read the inside dust jacket or like part of it, because I feel like I'm not doing this justice when it's like such a favorite book. But it says, when a teenager vanishes from her Adirondack summer camp, two worlds collide. Early morning, August 1975, a camp counselor discovers an empty bunk. Its occupant, Barbara Van Laar, has gone missing. Barbara isn't just any 13-year-old. She's the daughter of the family that owns a summer camp and employs most of the region's residents. And this isn't the first time a Van Laar child has disappeared. Barbara's older brother similarly vanished 14 years ago, never to be found. I loved it. This book was so atmospheric, so good. I love the mystery. I loved everything about it. Okay, so read it, pick it up. I think this one mystery thriller, which I would not call this a thriller, but it is a good mystery. I know some people feel really strongly that they didn't like it, but to me, this was my cup of tea. I guess this is actually my number 2 spot. That is The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon. I just read this book. Like, this past week. I listened to the audiobook while I was wrapping presents, going Christmas shopping, all the things, and I loved this book. Again, I feel like I had the same feeling with all 3 of these books of like, I feel like I'm gonna really love these books. I'm pretty sure someone recommended me this book when it was like in the vlog that I read The God of the Woods. They suggested that I might pick up this one and really like it too, because it kind of had similar feels, and I agree 100%. So if that was you, thank you so much for recommending me this book. I don't know if I would have picked it up because it is a historical fiction book and I'm not normally a historical fiction person, but I feel like maybe I'm more of one than I realize. I think it just has to be more literary than romance historical. you know? But we're following this woman in the story. Her name is Martha Ballard. She was a real person, which I think is so cool. I love when books can make history come alive, you know? Like, I think that that's so awesome. And like when you can learn about someone who really existed through a fiction book, you know, through really good reading. But I think that this author did take some liberties with Martha's story, and kind of not everything is like exactly how it was. She just imagined it to be this way at some points, but she really was a woman in the 1700s, and she lived in like the colonies. She was a midwife, and she actually testified in a, I don't know if I can say this word on my channel, so I'm going to spell it, an RAPE trial for a woman. The way Ariel wrote was stunning. The way she portrayed Martha was so good. Like so good. I love it when books highlight women, strong women in history, not just in history, but just in general, like stories of strong women who face a lot of misogynistic ideals and community and aren't taken seriously because they're a woman. You know, this was just such a powerful story. I also really loved that the author decided to put in a lot of references to Shakespeare, and they would talk about the bard, and just the quotes before each chapter usually were a Shakespeare quote, and I loved it. I just completely adored it. The atmosphere in this book was so vivid and felt so real. It almost felt like the atmosphere itself, or the river itself, was a character in this book because it had such a presence in this community. This river that brings life or stops life. Obviously, in this book, in this time of this book, it was frozen. It's like at the dead of winter, and I feel like I could reread it right now. There were gothic elements to it that I loved. It just felt very atmospheric and gothic. There's a mystery, there's a murder mystery that's going on throughout this book, and I cannot express to you. It was just stunning. It was stunning. Okay? Pick it up. Oh, but I will say, I do want to warn you, there are some really heavy scenes in here with the RAPE situations, because you heard that right, there's more than one. And the author's note actually says that she actually tampered it down in this book. What actually happened was actually super, like, a lot worse than what she wrote, which is hard to even wrap my mind around. But anyways, highly recommend if you feel like you could handle a little bit heavier of a story, but one very much worth reading. I haven't stopped thinking about this one since I read it, and I feel like it's gonna be with me along with both of these books. They just feel the same to me. I can't really explain it, but they just kind of, maybe it's the emotional part of it that has me thinking and really introspective, I would say. Highly recommend. And number one, I can't not put this at number one just because it was so good. It was so good when I read it. And it is good still, but you know what I mean. I had the best experience reading it. That is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This has like a gold foil thing, so it's kind of shiny, but I already loved this story. This is a story that everyone knows. It's Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy. He is very rich, very prideful, and prejudiced. And Elizabeth Bennet is also very prideful and very prejudiced. I read this with one of my dear friends, and it was just such a wonderful experience. This book is funny. Like, I did not expect to be laughing out loud at this book, at some of the things that these characters do and say. I adored everyone in this book. Everyone, except for Mr. Collins. Okay, if you know, you know. But I literally just had the best time. There's so many quotes in here that I tabbed that I can't wait to go reread this book. I think what elevated my reading experience so much was learning a little more about this book, and I will link the video down below by Benjamin McAvoy, I think is how you say his name. I, first of all, absolutely love his channel. He is a brilliant person who knows a lot about classic books, and I love hearing him talk about different books. His video on this was absolutely phenomenal, and I will not do it justice, but I think watching that video and then reading this really elevated it so much. He talked about a lot of things in that video, but one of the things was how Jane Austen was really the first novelist, which I did not know that. Prior to Jane Austen, it was kind of believed that novels, if they weren't a real story, shouldn't be written, it shouldn't be consumed. It's kind of dark or not of God if it's not true, which I think is interesting, because just because something didn't really happen doesn't mean it's not true, right? Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? I just love how strong of a woman Jane Austen was, just to be a woman in that time and to be writing something like this and other things that she's so famous for. There's a reason. There's a reason why this book is so deeply loved. And if you haven't read it, you should. You really, really should. Like I've said, I'm not a romance girly, but I think I'm a Pride and Prejudice romance girly. When there is depth, when there is, I can think about the characters, they feel super real to me. The fact that this was, I think, maybe one of her first books to write? You're kidding me. Like, you're kidding me. The talent astounds me. I think my favorite part about this was how real all of the characters felt. Even side characters like Mrs. Bennet and Mr. Bennet, I just adored them. Mr. Darcy. Mr. Darcy, you know? And I love Elizabeth and the sister dynamics. If you didn't know, Elizabeth has four sisters? I'm pretty sure. 4 sisters. And Mrs. Bennet is like in a fever to get all of her children married off. That's something I really appreciated about Benjamin's video, because he was able to explain why it was such a big deal. The social aspects of that time that I just don't know about. One, because I live in 2024, but also because I'm not English, I'm American. And so even some things that maybe people from England would understand, because it's still, I mean, it's not the exact same, but it's like still part of their culture and they know more about it. As far as the importance of, you know, properties and marrying to whoever so that you can make sure that your daughters get taken care of, and like estates and whatnot. It's lost in translation, I think, to Americans sometimes, unless you just know about it. So I was really, really, really so thankful to his video to be able to read this and understand it in a deeper way. I loved it. I also really appreciated something he talked about was how you don't know what you feel about things until you are confronted with those ideas through fiction. That really rocked my world, because at this time, this past summer and spring, I was thinking through, should I just be reading Christian books? Like, I'm a Christian and I don't necessarily want to be reading dark books. I don't want to be doing that. But I think that that was such a pivotal moment for me to hear him say that, because you really don't know what you think about things or what you believe about things until you see it in a story. We operate like that in our lives. You know, a friend might tell you a story about something that happened and you judge that based on morality. Like, that's wrong or that's right. You know what I mean? I just loved everything that he said in that, but that was such a pivotal thing for me to be like, you know what? No, I think it's good to be reading Christian fiction and, you know, just general fiction, non-Christian necessarily, because there is goodness and beauty and truth in all things, because God created all things. So anyways, I just really loved it. I had the best time. I had a really cool experience with it. It is my #1. I will be revisiting it. It was just, I don't really have a lot of words. It was stunning, marvelous, fantastic. It made me swoon. It made me think deeply, and it made me really proud to be a woman and also just really proud of Jane Austen for being who she was in the time that she was existing and how she operated, how she moved in her life. And I really appreciate it. A lot of times in her books, there's morality and characters grappling with their morality and what is right and good and true and beautiful. This is beautiful. So I can't recommend it more. There we have it, my friends. These are my top 10 books of 2024, which everyone has said it, but I really agree. How is it the end of 2024? You know, like, how is that a thing? About to enter into 2025, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you some goals, some just thoughts that I have for the next year, some books I want to read, some Bible studies I want to do. I just kind of want to share all those things eventually with you. I would love to hear what books made it to your top 10 or top 1 or top 5, any of the above. If you think, based on my reading taste here, if you think that one sounds similar that you've read, let me know, because I'm always looking for recommendations. Like I said, this book was a recommendation from you, and so thank you. It was my number 2 book. I don't think I would have picked this up had it not been for one of you saying, it's like this, I think you might like this. So anyways, let me know if you have any suggestions like that down below. I hope that you are staying warm and cozy and that you've been able to spend time with family this season. But even if not, I just pray that you do feel the love of Jesus this season, that he reveals himself to you in a new way, in a fresh way, and just that you feel how much you are deeply loved. Until next time, my friends, I will see you in my next bookish video. Bye.